But some of us remember how India was depicted a couple of decades ago as a slow-moving elephant, post-liberalization maybe as a fast-moving elephant. There was talk about it being a tiger, but the symbol that you have brought in your book is that of a leviathan. And this is definitely a new imagery where India is concerned. So I want to start by asking you to flag off, how did the leviathan come and how does it match up to India's potential for the colossal strides we expect it to take?
No, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for hosting us to Mumbai Lit Fest. Thank you, Paula, for moderating the session. So just quickly on the point about a new India. So I was sitting in this room yesterday when Pratibha Reji got her Lifetime Achievement Award from the Mumbai Lit Fest. And I have to be honest, whilst I'm an avid book reader, I hadn't heard of Pratibha Reji till yesterday. I then went home and read up, and I was astonished that I hadn't heard of her colossus like that in Odia literature. What astonished me yesterday, though, was of the average age in the room wasn't 40 or 45. The average age in the room was 25, 30. Right? Most of the people in the room yesterday were youngsters. They were aware of her work. They were aware of why Jagna Seni is a essential work for Indians to read. Why Barsha, Basanto, Boishakh, I think her first book is a book that many youngsters in the room had read. I think that exemplifies to me the change that's taking place in the country. Indians are becoming aware of their identity. They have belief in their identity, and that's manifesting itself in not just pride, but a generation of ideas, a generation of lines of thinking, which I think, as you're suggesting as a VC investor, Paula, lines of thinking which were hidden, suppressed till a decade ago. Now, we use the Leviathan as in a way a reflection of that. So just a quick sort of background on the Leviathan. It's a biblical figure supposed to represent a colossus sea serpent, right? A marine serpent, colossus in its nature. 500 years ago, the economist Thomas Hobbes was the first person to use the Leviathan to refer to the state. And he used the Leviathan to refer to the state because he said the state, the government, is an ambiguous creature. It can be a creature for enormous good, but it can also be an enormously destructive creature, right? So Thomas Hobbes was the first person to portray the government, the state, as an ambiguous creature of enormous power. And we use the title Behold the Leviathan because we think the Indian state has enormous power. It's a creature of enormous power, and hence the word behold. But it's also a Leviathan, right? And the first 3 chapters of the book focus on this ambiguous nature of the Indian state. Then we switch gears and we move to the subtitle. The Unusual Rise of Modern India is the sort of chapters 4 through to 9, where we describe the remarkable ways, the unusual ways, the ways in which most people don't perceive India to have changed, and yet the change is there, right? And in a way, chapter 4 of the book is the representative chapter. It's about the fact that women today, in modern India, in urban India, women have more money than men. Perhaps the most controversial chapter of the book, and Nandita, I'm sure, will talk more about it, that women in urban India now have more money than men. They actually invest more than men. Right? But to most people who we've spoken to in the last 10 days, the book has sold 13,000 copies in 10 days. But the constant pushback is saying that no, women don't make money, ho nahi raha aisa. And in a way, looping back yesterday to the magical session where Pratibha Reji was felicitated yesterday, I think that's just like I was ignorant of her contributions to Indian literature. I think many people in our country haven't yet woken up to the remarkable nature of gender-based change that's taking place in India.
Well, that's really heartening to hear as a woman, especially as a woman investor, where I often say I remember every woman entrepreneur who's pitched to me for no other reason but because there have been such few. And that's changing. I'm seeing a shift. Mm-hmm. We are also, very few women in this space, as in the VC space, but that also is changing. Of course, we have a long way to go, but great segue then to bring in Nandita. Of course, this is a bit controversial. I may say, if I may say myself, I may also contest that, saying, while I'm seeing more women entrepreneurs, the amount of funding they get is far below the average funding of a male entrepreneur, or especially if it's an all-female team. Having said that, of course, anecdotally, you're seeing many, many more women up there in leadership roles as role models. So there is a shift in the narrative. Is it symbolic or can you back it up by data? The wage gap, the fact that women in workforce numbers, we lag behind people, countries like Bangladesh or Sri Lanka even. How do you sort of put it together? And I must say it's my favorite chapter in the book, the role of women, the rising ascendancy of women, and how that is actually going to fuel the economic engine of India.
Right. So thank you, Paula, for raising this. And we've, as Saurabh said, that in the last 10 to 12 days, we've heard a lot about this. So just to give you a starter of what is it, it's a linear story, actually. If you put one and one together, you'll understand that there's a logical flow to what is happening. So around 15 years ago, I was in school, and I used to keep hearing year after year that more women are passing the 10th and 12th exam in the country. And not only that, they're scoring much higher than their male counterparts. So that was something that was anecdotal. I did not have data to back it up, but there was something that was happening. Then I think a couple of years ago, when we were researching for a blog that we keep writing about, we write it almost every month. So the topic was about women. And I came across this data set from the Government of India, which showed that at all levels of education, not just primary, secondary, but also at higher secondary and university level, more women per men are getting enrolled into educational institutions. So this is quite remarkable. So at the university level, you have more women per man enrolling. If that is the case, and the educational outcomes are also better for women, naturally it makes them a very ripe participant or candidate for jobs in a country like India, which is mostly services. 60% of our economy is services, where your brain is more required than brawn. So as this happens, women will get into the workforce more. And if you look at the RBI data that Saurabh was talking about, women today have more money in their bank accounts than men do in urban and metro areas. Again, these are the places where you would see a lot of services-led jobs. So that's the thing that's happening. We're seeing almost 14% higher amount of money in women's bank accounts than men. When we travel throughout the country, we're told by bankers and financiers that it's not 14%. Women have almost 2.5 times money than compared to men in their bank accounts. So the natural pushback again was that, okay, maybe women have less number of bank accounts. That's why the average number looks larger for them. But then according to data by World Bank, women also have more number of bank accounts. So that can't be the case. It's the numerator which is large. Another pushback that we get is that, hey, one second, men will be transferring money into their women's or their wives' accounts because of tax benefits or something like that. But then taxes always existed. They existed 5 years ago, they existed 10 years ago, they existed 20 years ago. Why are we seeing now that this change is happening? So obviously there is something here. There's an income-led effect is what we thought. And clearly, if you look at the tech industry, women earn 7% more on an average than men do. So that was quite remarkable. It's an income side effect. It's not a new denominator effect. It's not that transfer effect that is happening there. So it's a very logical flow.
But Saurabh, do you have more female clients if they are investing?
So we have a few female clients. We're now realizing that we need to have more. And now that we have seen by the way, the mutual fund industry data shows that a typical woman has 25% more in her mutual fund investments than a man. Having seen that, my colleagues and I have become alerted to the new opportunity. But jokes apart, I'll cite a piece of, I think reasonably credible data. It's on page 69 of the book. It's taken from what's called the Periodic Labor Force Survey. This is a government survey. Right? So what we have shown is we've shown periodic labor force data over time. And we've shown that for women, the share of self-employment by own account, right? Now, this is an important qualifier. Self-employment by own account means you're not a domestic servant or a driver or someone doing what we call a menial job. You are running an enterprise, right? Self-employment by own account, i.e. running an enterprise of one's own account, and self-employment as an employer, i.e. running a business. This has increased between 2017 to 2023. Right? These trends are not evident for men. Right? I stress again, it's the same data set, folks, PLFS, Periodic Labor Force Survey. The data is very clear. Men are not being able to progress in the same way as women are being able to progress in India. Now, why that is, Why that is a trillion-dollar question. I think there'll be many schools of thought on it. Nandita gave you one point of view, that a services economy actually helps women rise. But as investors in India, our mindset is very clear. We load up on women-oriented consumption items, and we will also pursue, as Paula very politely has highlighted us, we'll also pursue women investors. This is a seismic change, and I think it portends well for our country.
Great. That brings us to the next strong point that you make in the book about the new educated elite, which is, different from the typical IIT, IIM, pedigreed urban Indian that we've typically associated with success, financial success, etc. I want, before you get on to whoever wants to take this, but maybe both of you can give a perspective. But I also want you to highlight whether the new educated elite that we're talking about, are they actually contributing to the growth? Whether it's through entrepreneurship, whether it's through being participating in the corporate world and so on, or are we just creating more educated unemployed? Because that is one theme that we constantly hear, that we are churning out a lot of educated people, but we're not able to give them jobs. I mean, one hears of all kinds of, and you also mentioned a few examples of people with PhDs or higher degrees who sometimes have to go back to their hometowns and so on. So maybe two parts to the question: who are these people? Why are they relevant? And are we doing enough for them?
So writing one's epitaph is never easy, folks. And in a way, people like me are increasingly going to be yesterday's story. The new elite is very different from people like me. So I'll divide and conquer. I'll give you the data on the new educated elite, and then I'll ask Nandita to give you the operating models, the sort of business models that a new generation of Indians are using to rise in the world. Those business models are very different from what we are accustomed to as highly educated people, right? So here is the numbers, right? If you look at the Government of India income tax data, people filing annual IT returns of 1 crore or more, that number was a mere 20,000-30,000 a decade ago. In the FY24, the latest IT data, that number is 220,000, right? 220,000 people are filing income tax returns of 1 crore or more. If you were to look at corporate data, a similar polarization has taken place, right? Out of 1.4 million companies registered to pay corporate tax, a million file nil returns, which means they make zero profit. The corresponding polarization there has been roughly 70,000 companies. Just 70,000 companies make 98% of corporate India's profits, right? So you're seeing a polarization in earnings of rich families, and you're seeing a polarization in profitability of successful enterprises, 70,000 of them, right? So this is the data. Now, who are these families? Who are these 220,000 families who are filing IT returns of 1 crore or more? Or if you want to look at it another way, who are the 70,000 businesses who account for a staggering 98% of India's PAT? I request Nandita to shed some color on that.
Right. So this is one of our favorite stories that we came across, and we've written about it in the book, and we always speak about it. So bear with us if there's a little bit of repetition here. But to drive the point through, let's look at this one grain trader, for example, in a village or a small city called Sangli in Maharashtra. He's a grain trader. So he basically buys grains off the market and then trades it and sells it for a price and then earns a little bit of margin there. Now think about this. If that grain trader is generating a profit, a smart grain trader, what will he do? He'll take those profits and invest in, a cold storage unit. So once you take a cold storage unit, the shelf life of those grains automatically increases. That means now he has pricing power because he can sell it when it is profitable for him to sell and get more margin on whatever he's selling. So he gets into that grain storage business. Now that in turn gets him more profits. So that whole cycle begins where he gets more profits. Then he says that, okay, let me diversify now, and I will, perhaps go and get a Royal Enfield dealership, or let's say a Maruti car dealership. So he does that. Again, profits from those rise, and it compounds. Now he becomes large enough for a small city or a small urban center like Sangli. And he says that now I have economic power, I have reasonable hold over my wealth. Let me do one thing, let me take my daughter and put her up for the Zilla Parishad elections. Once that happens, once she gets elected to that post, then whatever kind of contracts come from the government into the city, maybe it may be road construction, it may be some school construction, whatever it is, he then becomes the only point of contact for them to go to and build those things for them. So he, in a way, gets economic power from all these profitable things that he's put his hands into. He also gets political power. So these two make a very potent combination. Once that happens, he gets a control over the entire town. Now, think about this. We call it the octopus effect because he's put all his tentacles into multiple ventures and he's gotten that power. He has economic power, he has political power. In a typical small village, there will be 15 to 20 such families. In a slightly bigger city or an urban town center, sort of a thing, something like Varanasi, there will be around 100 to 200 such octopus families. Then if you look at a bigger city like Pune, there will be around 300 to 400 such octopus families. And if you go to a bigger city like Mumbai or Delhi, that will be 1,000 to 2,000 such families. They control most of the wealth in that particular city, urban center or metro area. And the urban sort of octopus have a different model where they get their profits and everything at a corporate level. So they have ESOPs and companies that they work in, they have enormous wealth, and they control the city. They have both economic and political power.
And you'll note here that elite education plays no role in these models, whether it's an ESOP wala model or it's the Sangli wala model, right? And the representation of that you can see in the Nifty 50 board directorship. So Nandita did a mind-blowing crunch a year ago, a crunch which forced me to revisit my preconceptions of India. She showed that the directors of the Nifty 50 companies, a minority of them now come from IITs, IIMs and overseas education. 20 years ago, the majority of board directors in India came from IITs, IIMs and from overseas education, right? So that model of getting yourself hyper-educated and thinking that will take you places in the world, that no longer works in India. A different model, thinking entrepreneurially, thinking politically, thinking as someone who can use modern technology and harness it to build a business. That's the model which works, and hence the book. The book is there to say that the mental models we use to understand India are increasingly outdated. The models are outdated on a gender basis, and the models are also outdated as to how we believe we can rise in the world.
So another theme that you talk about on the rise of India, and I think we've all experienced it over the last, especially 5 years, is the whole digital transformation. And this has brought in a whole new class or a new access for various things, whether it's just ordering from Swiggy or Zomato, or paying not just online but paying instantly, or having things delivered to you instantly, having access to markets all over the world, and so on. And this is the underlying spine for this is what is called the India Stack, or the digital public infrastructure, and that has only been growing. It's I think a fantastic, I would say, an operation that has been undertaken in a public-private partnership, and that has really something that you build on. I think that seems to be empowering this Leviathan in a big way, and you've given many anecdotes about it. Can you unpack some of this for us? How this has happened, and what are the consequences, and how is it going to map out our future?
So let me do a generic example, and I'll request Nandita to do a digital example which plays into the women empowerment piece. Because these effects, right, these transformational effects are intertwining with each other to devastating effects. So I'll give you a general example. So we know about Jan Dhan Aadhaar Mobile, we know about the rise of UPI. So the straightforward stuff is well understood. What I think we as investors are still wrapping our heads around is that this new DPI, digital public infrastructure, has changed the way Indians earn a living. So yesterday, as I was standing in various queues to listen to various sessions, I bumped into a gentleman who writes op-eds for a prominent newspaper. I've known him a little bit socially, so we got chatting about AI and the disruption that it will cause for the Indian middle class. So he told me something which blew my mind. So he's working on a book on the subject. So he said that there are now 1 million Indians who earn between 1 lakh to 10 lakh per month on YouTube. 1 million Indians who earn between 1 lakh to 10 lakh per month on YouTube. He then said that there are, I won't give you the number, but it's a vast number, tens of millions of Indians on the dark net. Now, I'm sure there are a bunch of things you can do on the dark net, but what I know from my beginner's guide to the dark net is you earn in Bitcoin, right? You don't sort of get paid in rupees. Income tax people don't find out what you get, right? So there's a whole world of opportunity which is opened up. So the obvious effects of technology, the chai wala getting paid through UPI, the chai wala then being able to go to a bank and get a loan, those I think are first order effects. They're immediately visible. But I think there are second and third order effects of DPI, of digital public infrastructure, which we need to wrap our heads around, because this will again interplay with the rise of the Middle East, right? It's highly unlikely that you'll have a conventional education and then you'll use technology unconventionally. People who grow up thinking differently are going to be able to tap into digital infrastructure in a way that perhaps our generation never envisaged. Over to Nandita.
Yeah, so this is actually the starting example of chapter number 4, and it plays on to many themes. Women, obviously, but more than that, also the DPI point that you raised, Paula. So there's this one lady who sits out of Jail Road Market in Delhi, and she basically sells bedazzled kurtas and apparel. Now that lady obviously does not have a very strong hold of English like the Queen's English that we speak. It's very very organic, desi kind of English, and English basically, if you want to put it that way. So that lady became viral over the internet, over Instagram, because of one phrase. So beautiful, so elegant, looking like a wow. So obviously it's not grammatically correct. It's nothing to do with the Queen's English. Nothing is perfect about that. It still got viral. Why did it get viral? Because it connected with a lot of people. How did it happen? It happened over internet, over Instagram, over social media. Now, this lady, if you think about it, if she did not have access to that internet connection, she did not have access to Instagram, this would have never come out. She would have just catered to a very specific set of people, specific set of consumers who are from that area, who know her and who know the quality of the apparel, to buy from her. Because of this internet sensation that she became, the viral thing that happened, she went all across the country. She got famous all across the country, and now people, whoever visit Jail Market Road in Delhi, can actually go and buy things from her. So her, the whole TAM that she's catering to, that expanded exponentially. This is the power of DPI. She can get paid electronically. She can get access to a bigger market. She can get financing because of that, because of the scale of operations that she'll run. So I wouldn't be surprised if she opens up a shop in Mumbai itself and starts selling it, and just puts the name of the shop as so beautiful, so elegant, just looking like a wow.
And Paula, if you don't mind, I'll give a more subversive example from the same chapter. So this is a subversive example, so folks treat it as such. This is a real life story. India Today reported this story, right? So this is how the story read. I quote from India Today. Around 11 married women have gone missing from different villages in Uttar Pradesh's Maharajganj district after receiving the first installment of PM Awas Gramin Yojana. One of them has allegedly eloped with her lover. The government scheme, the next paragraph explains, politely India Today explains what PM Awas Gramin Yojana means. Then, the third paragraph. Preliminary investigation, I'm not making this up, preliminary investigation by the block development officer revealed that Sunia had eloped with an unknown person, taking with her the 40,000 installment recently released by the government, right? And it then goes on to report that 11 other women in the village have also eloped, right? So this is social change, this is economic change, this is empowering change, this is Indian change, direct benefit transfer, digital public infrastructure, long live all of that.
Well, that's certainly, I think, a Netflix story right there. But on that note, on a more serious note, how do you translate this whole digital DPI into a growth number as an economist? Do you think this will actually lead, what are the metrics maybe that we could relate to how this is going to actually move the needle on India's economic numbers, making it really the Leviathan that we are talking about.
So let's talk about what's in the book, and then we'll talk about what I think all of us in this room need to do some further thinking of. So what's in the book we've said is that having spent a lot of time with Nandan Nilekani, having spent a lot of time with the people who were behind the first layer of BPI, the UPI stack, the India stack, what we call India Stack 1, right, Jan Dhan Aadhaar Mobile. It's clear that it's made a difference, but it's also clear that issues around mass unemployment, especially in the north and the east, issues around access to healthcare, there seems to be an explosion of cardiovascular and diabetic diseases in rural India, and it's not evident that there's healthcare available. Issues around healthcare, issues around mass employment, issues around skilling, education need an AI layer on top of India Stack 1, right? And in the epilogue of the book, we explained courtesy help from Ekstep. Ekstep is the not-for-profit fund funded by Nandani and Rohini Nilekani. Courtesy help from them, we've explained how API can marry with India Stack 1 to create population scale, mass scale solutions for education, for healthcare, for employment. We've also explained that needs money. It needs money for training the bots. It needs money for paying for the GPU burn that will take place when, say, a Mizo girl speaks into her app that she's 17 and she wants, she's happy to do an internship provided someone gives her a scholarship to study physics at the Indian Institute of Science. So someone will have to pay for the GPU burn, someone will have to pay for training the bots, and thirdly, someone will have to pay for publicizing this. Hopefully there will be philanthropists in India or somewhere else in the world who will step up and do this, because this is a chance to sort of get posterity and leave a legacy that I think will be on an epic scale. So that's what we've talked about, right? What we don't fully understand is the underlying impact of DPI, of low-cost broadband on earnings patterns, right? That data, as I was explaining, this whole surge in YouTube earners, this whole surge of darknet activity, there are people who are earning money, but we don't fully understand how AI, how technology is changing patterns of employment. We read the sort of op-eds in the newspapers, which sort of spell a dystopian, nightmarish story that AI will destroy middle-class jobs. Negative to samajh aata hai, but there is a positive side as well on which more data, more thinking, more research needs to be done, because whilst we are seeing a consumer downturn, we're not seeing the economy fall over courtesy the mass unemployment issues. So clearly people are figuring out how to earn a living. What we need to do, and what others who are interested in the subject need to do, is more work on how has this DPI allowed Indians to earn a better living. I think that piece is as yet missing from the discourse.
Right, and I think that ties in really well with the title again, going back there, Leviathan. So it's basically, there's a rise of a colossal animal or a creature, which is India, the rise of India, but it has a few darker sides also. It's a monster at the end of the day, no matter how big it is. So I think it ties in with the title really well, that there are a few negative aspects, and that's how any free market economy rises. It's happened to USA, it's happening to us. I mean, that's the natural discourse that any developing country will follow. We need to be mindful of the darker aspects, but we need to incrementally just focus on the good aspects and make money, because that's what at the end of the day matters. You can cry about the negative outcomes, you can cry about a lot of things, but at the end of the day you have to realize that what's going to make you money, what's going to make you better off in a changing country, and you need to adapt to that.
So on that note, while we've talked about the services economy, which has led, especially exports growth for India, when we are talking about Leviathan and superpower and so on, one cannot not mention China. So we've always been compared with China. China's got a different political structure, but they've taken much bigger, much more colossal strides than we can ever imagine. China Plus or China 2.0, where is India going to be in that? And are we going to move from the services economy to the manufacturing economy on the heels of, Make in India, China Plus and whatnot? And is that going to create the jobs that have been elusive? Is that really going to pull the unemployment numbers down? And I must point out that, your book is quite balanced, and while we've talked only about the optimistic and the positive parts, maybe you also want to touch upon the people left behind with this whole setup that we've talked about, and will they continue to be pulled down, or will a new policy regime or a new approach, maybe including things like manufacturing, bring them into the fold as well?
Sure. So on the people left behind piece, folks, again, just referring to government data, and the astonishing thing is the government puts out plenty of free data. For whatever reason, most people in the media don't use it. So one straightforward aspect we're pointing to, again, using the government income tax data, is it's not just people earning less than, say, 2-3 lakhs who are falling behind. In the government data, it's also pretty clear that the conventional middle class is also falling behind. So when manufacturers of small cars express surprise that gaadi nahi bik raha, you kind of ask, if you look at the data, how will you sell your cars if the government data is showing for 10 years that the middle class is falling behind? So I think there's a real challenge in our country in that the data is published, the media doesn't pick it up, and then corporate India pretends as if they were completely blindsided by this aspect. So it's not just the underclass which is falling behind. I think even the middle class has a serious income earning challenge on its hands. In terms of the China piece, right, we've been very candid in the book. I think it's a bit delusional to believe that given our high cost of labor, we're one of the poorest countries in the world. We're amongst the 50 poorest nations in the world. In that context, our labor is very expensive. So Maharashtra's minimum wage is 3 times that of Bangladesh. Right? You can imagine, right? If you have a minimum wage thrice that of Bangladesh, how can you expect to make much here? Why won't an Indian entrepreneur go to Bangladesh and make it? Our land costs in Maharashtra, or indeed Gujarat, are significantly higher than Vietnam or China, and our working capital costs are 2 to 3x higher. So for us to kid ourselves that we will make t-shirts or wind cheaters or sport shoes and export those, I think is a little wonky. What we can do, will do very successfully is, because China has chosen to take a belligerent stance vis-a-vis the West, right? Why they've done it is a separate question, but China has very clearly chosen to take a belligerent stance vis-a-vis the West, and because China makes 10x more of everything compared to us, in items where the West believes its security is threatened, the West will diversify to India, even if it costs more than China. Almost certainly it will cost more than China for us to make it here, but in a whole range of items where the West's security is a threat, we will become a very viable alternative. So 3 examples which we have cited in chapter 7 of the book are active pharmaceutical ingredients, the churan which makes a dawai. So China makes $180 billion of it. We make $20 billion of it. So even if we take 10% of their market, our industry doubles, right? The second is medical devices. $400 billion market, we make $2 billion, right? They make close to 100. So even if we take 10%, our medical devices industry grows manifold. And the third is smartphones, iPads, tablets, etc. Again, roughly $400 billion market. Till 2 years ago, we made $2 billion. Till 2 years ago, we made just $2 billion of the stuff. Courtesy Apple, we now make $25 billion. And I think Apple said last week, I think, Paula, they've given a date, this being Apple, they've given a date by which they'll make a third of their $200 billion worth of pads and phones in India. Right? So these are 3 areas where using skill, using knowledge, using dimag, we can overcome our high cost structure. Right? So the debate on this subject is worth having, but I think some of the emphasis on creating jobs rather than creating a viable sector is a little misplaced.
Sure. On that positive note, I'm going to open it up for Q&A. I think there are some mics going around if there are any questions. Maybe you can just try to say it. Yeah, just go ahead.
Hi, Monisha.
Very late question. Hi, Monisha here, and this is for you, Saurabh. So just wanted to ask you in a very lay language, is the gap between the rich and the poor going up or going down?
So for every country, for every single country in the world, up to $10,000 per capita income, right? Every single development experience, Japan, America, Taiwan, Korea, up to $10,000, inequality expands, and India is no stranger to that experience. So if you like movies, and I'm sure there'll be movie lovers here, there's a tremendous Japanese movie called High and Low, right? So 1961 movie, 1961, so as recently as 60 years ago. If you watch High and Low, you'll think it's set in Dharavi. right? If you see photographs of Gangnam in Seoul in the early 70s, it looks like Dharavi, right? So up to $10,000, that phase of development creates inequality, and we've used the power law in economics to cite that. So the power law refers to the fact that any highly competitive dynamic will create outsized winners and a few of them and loads of losers. So the Wimbledon tennis tournament is an example of the power law. The champion takes home 50x more prize money than the first round loser, right? So up to $10,000, pretty much every development experience has in a way mimicked the power law. Then the state steps in and says that there's more votes to be got from now uplifting people, and that's when inequality reduces. But very difficult to see between now and $10,000 how we redress this. As I'm sure everybody in Mumbai is aware, what's going to happen next Wednesday, and you can see what's happening in the precursor to Wednesday, right?
We'll take one more.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for covering a wide variety of topics in the book. I have one question, like given the fact that India has a strong support from Western countries as well as US,
Yeah.
but from 1.5 months we are seeing that FIS are going away from India and it is like expected to go to China. So whether this book covers any part of that aspect?
No, so we've not gone into day-to-day FII flows. No, FIs will come, FIs will
Take a
go.
quick second,
You can read
please.
about that in the
Last
papers.
question.
Thank you, sir.
That's the last one. I think we'll have to end with that.
Thank you for the wonderful conversations.
Our
I
pleasure.
appreciate that. And thing that you, Saurabh, you mentioned about the data available but not being picked up by media and hence the narrative not popular enough for a lot of people, intelligent intellectuals to pick up and see the trend going. How do you access this data? Where are they available? If you can throw some light and elucidate on that.
Sure. Nandita, why don't you highlight the data sources used in the book?
Yes, so most of the data sources, actually all of it is publicly available, freely available. So I personally look at the Government of India data as well, because there's a large data repository that is often untapped. A lot of people don't know how to access it, or maybe they're not aware.
So income tax, corporate tax?
Corporate tax data, you get a time series from, I think, 2012 onwards.
Which website?
So it's the IT department's website, and the footnotes already have it. Endnotes have the exact location of that. So you can go there. There's a really good data repository at World Bank website, because it has a lot of data and a long time series. You can have a look at that. CMI data, I think, is paid for, so you won't be able to get access. But again, there's a lot of things that you need to do to make sense of it. But apart from that, if you look at just the government data, there's a large data repository. MCA has a good data repository as well. IMF has good data repository. All of it is free.
So can I also address the subtext in that gentleman's lovely question, right? So what's happened is, because the traditional media business models are now sort of crumbling in front of us, they no longer have the resources or the wherewithal to even download free data, analyze it and present it to you. And therefore what's happening is we all of us need to turn to books, podcasts, tweets, right, by thinkers who are using the same free data, right? So the via media for information has changed from being one to many traditional media to new media, which is one of the reasons I think there are so many people.
Yeah. So on that note, I'm going to ask everyone to get more questions and answers, both from this book.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Paula.
Nandita and Saurabh.